Diversity, it might be what's holding your team back, and you may not know it yet and may not know how to solve it. For that reason, I'm really excited to tell you that Data Futurology has established a partnership with She Loves Data, and we're doing a series dedicated on improving diversity in your organization, in your teams, in your workplace, so you can get the most value out of your teams, out of your data, and create products that the market really wants. Tune in every week as we speak with executives and female leaders from all over the world on how they have targeted and improved the diversity in their teams, and you can find out what we can learn from them.
We are thrilled as a She Loves Data to be part of the Futurology podcast, where we will showcase some female leaders, but the leaders from tech industry, and we will be talking about strategies, about data, about biases, and about diversity. Join us.
I wanted to say a big thank you to our sponsors. One of our sponsors is Shine Solutions Group. Shine Solution Group is a technology consultancy that has been empowering their enterprise and government partners with pragmatic technology solutions for over 20 years. Learn more at shinesolutions.com. Also, a big thank you to SAS, giving you the power to know. Through innovative software and services, SAS empowers and inspires data advocates around the world to transform data into intelligence. Committed to diversity, did you know about the Women in Analytics network that they have? It's a SAS-sponsored networking program aimed to strengthen diversity in the analytics field. Check it out in the show notes below. They're definitely committed to it as they're helping us with this diversity series too. I also would like to tell you about Growing Data. Growing Data is a consultancy that helps organizations unlock the full potential of their data. They work with some of Australia's most successful organizations from finance. They work with people like ANZ Bank, through to biotechnology, companies like CSL, and all the way to construction, working with companies like Metrocon. They help these and many more companies solve their most challenging data-related problems in analytics, machine learning, data engineering, and data governance. While I was at ANZ Bank, I got the pleasure to work with the team at Growing Data, and I can tell you for a fact they are top-notch. I highly recommend Growing Data. Find out more at growingdata.com.au. Also, a big thank you to Talent Insights. Talent Insights are Australia's leading data specialist recruitment business. They are experts in recruitment strategy and delivery for analytics and data teams. They are the go-to recruitment business for all your data roles in Australia, and they can help both with permanent hires and short-term project-focused data resources. I've used Talent Insights in the past, and I've always found them fantastic to work with. Visit them at talentinsights.com.au. Hi, I'm Felipe Flores. Welcome to another episode of Data Futurology during our diversity series that we're doing in partnership with She Loves Data. From She Loves Data, we have the co-founder, and he's also the Chief Marketing Officer at Mayro. He's Pavel Bulowski. Pavel, thanks for being with us today. How are you going?
Hi guys, it's exciting. Again, early morning for me here in Europe, but it's lovely to connect with everyone virtually on the other side of the world today. So super excited to be here.
Right. Thank you so much for making the time. And today we have two lovely guests coming to us from very interesting locations. We have Virginia Wheway. She's the Vice President of Data Analytics at Koala. And we have Jen Shepherd, who is the Chief Data Officer at Tertiary Education Commission in New Zealand. How are you both doing?
Hi, yeah, absolutely great, and really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
And super from here. We're about to head into a long weekend, and it's Friday afternoon, so doubly super in New South Wales, in Australia.
Doubly excited. So first, tell us, where exactly are you both? Maybe Virginia, you can tell us first about where you are, and then I'll ask you the same, Jen.
Sure. So I'm actually in the Hunter Valley. We're very lucky to have a bush property, 160 acres in the Hunter. Actually, interesting, you might see behind me the bushfires came through here last December. So that was a pretty intense time. But in good news, you can see all the green regenerating from there. So I'm here, and I'm lucky enough to work for a company that lets me work from wherever I want to. And so this week I've chosen to come up here and hang out in the bush.
Amazing. It looks beautiful. How about you, Jen?
Well, I'm actually away from the office at the moment. I'm in Stewart Island, which is a small island at the bottom of New Zealand. So I was going to be sitting outside to do this podcast, but the bird life is just so noisy. I've had to come inside.
Yeah, fantastic. And do you want to tell us a little bit about the race that you've got coming up?
Yeah, so it's pretty exciting. I've come down here to do a race tomorrow. So it's a 32-kilometre trail run around quite a scenic part of Stewart Island. So, yeah, really looking forward to that. It was glad we're here this weekend, not last weekend when it was snowing, but that would have been quite interesting. So, yeah.
I'm so impressed. No, very, very well done. And Pavel, whereabouts in Europe are you? Tell us a little bit.
I am in Czech Republic, in Prague. It's our company is based between here and Singapore. We've got the entire tech team here, so I have retreated from Jakarta just as the lockdown was coming down because I'm normally based in Indonesia, which is one of our offices. And I've made a way out just before the lockdown in March. I've been here 6 months, and I think it's been a big change because not only working remotely, I mean, we are basically remote company by design, but it's also because last year in 2019, I've been on plane every 3.5 days or something like that, and now I've had 6 months without getting on plane, which is refreshing actually. So.
Luxurious.
Different year, yeah.
In comparison, wow, what a schedule, mate. So I wanted to kick things off by asking our guests to tell us a little bit about the background, origin stories, and how they got to where you are today. Jan, I might start with you. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the world of data and a little bit about your background.
Excellent. So my journey into data started in 1999, where it was Y2K times, and it was kind of by accident, and it's quite intriguing actually. Started out, I was contracting at the time, and got offered a role as a tester, and I thought, well, that would be quite interesting. Know nothing about that, so I went along for the interview and got asked one question. Do you know what a relational database is? And I said yes, and got the job, and then got really hooked. I got really hooked, so I was testing the system, and then I got intrigued by how data flowed through the system and what happened to it along the way, and yeah, the rest is history. But yeah, now currently Chief Data Officer at the Tertiary Education Commission, like you said, and to be honest, that's my dream job. So it was destiny, I think.
And why is it your dream job?
Who doesn't love data? You get to change the world. You get to create new worlds through data. I did a marketing degree back when I was studying because it just fascinated me that you could give people new information and they'd make different decisions, and that's exactly what I do with data every day. You know, you give people data or information, and they can make better decisions, and the world can be a better place. So, yeah, living the dream.
I love it. And how about you, Virginia? Tell us about your background and how you got to where you are.
Sure. So I'm maybe 10 years before Jan. So out of high school, I did a mathematics and statistics cadetship at BHP,
Nice.
a big company, which at the time was pretty uncool thing to be doing. And so it's interesting now that, you know, in my early 20s, I was doing probably the most uncool degree of studying at university. And now I think we all know this is probably the coolest degree, one of the hottest degrees you could do at university. So I actually always wanted to be a vet, and then got this cadetship, but a bit like Jan, totally fell in love with the world of data and possibilities and modelling and maths. So I was unfortunately laid off from my job, and so then I chose to go and do a PhD. So I took my redundancy money, did a PhD in machine learning, which again in the 90s probably, wasn't such a hot thing, but it's become in very handy, this PhD. Worked at Boeing for a lot of years, had a great time, and maybe we can talk later some of the cool things that I worked on there. And then I've sort of worked as a lecturer, in big companies like BHP, TEAS, more recently at CIMIC, and now I've got a super cool job. So I work for Koala, which, for those who don't know, it's a furniture startup in Australia, and it's a purely e-commerce brand, and very big on using information customer journeys to inform their better decisions, and they're growing very rapidly. So it's I've only been there 3 weeks, and it's super fun.
Oh, great. No, they definitely have a fantastic brand and really great products. And I remember a few years seeing an ad during the Australian Open. They had an ad with Serena Williams, and I was like, that is great. So no, really, really nice.
So, ladies, and maybe let's start with Virginia. Last 6 months has been something we haven't lived through before. Obviously, very different time in business from work from home perspective, downturn in the markets. What, in both of you ladies being business leaders in data analytics space, what have you seen as a changes in our market in terms of hiring, in terms of labor market generally, skill sets that are coming up? Is there anything that you see sort of any proliferating trends that have been kind of obvious throughout the COVID pandemic?
So I'll jump in first. Yep. So I think it was a trend that I think was happening pre-COVID, but has possibly accelerated. In earlier years in this space, a lot of people were wanting the best machine learning, modeling, AI people, and they would hire their teams with those people to start with. But then these people would get into the organization, and then things like the data engineering and even some of the fundamental business intelligence, visualization, fundamental reporting wasn't in place. So sometimes they were hiring certain people when their team needed different people. So I see that as a trend, that particularly the data engineering position and the data visualization positions probably didn't exist a couple of years ago, and now they're often the leaders on the job board. And then I would say the way that COVID has then accelerated that is that companies, organizations have had to make some pretty quick decisions under a lot of pressure. And to do that, they need some very quick turnaround on reporting, visualization, charts. So again, I've had in a company I was at before, the machine learning people have been almost repurposed to design dashboards and that sort of thing. And so then I'm again noticing in the market, there's a lot more viz and engineering roles, even more so in COVID.
So that's an interesting point on repurposing the people who would be kind of specializing in data science and machine learning, like you said. And I've seen that especially in the smaller companies before, across the board, where people are brought in for fancy, ML, AI, advanced analytics roles, and then end up doing reporting for the company. So I'm curious, like, how's that experience for the team? What have you seen with your colleagues? How do they adapt to that easily? Is that sort of a natural change, or is it just demanded by the time that we are in?
Yeah, so and I think we'll probably cover that lately about building a team, but I find it very important to build a team on culture and personality and willingness. Yeah, willingness to be adaptable. Sorry, the fly. And so the sorts of people I hire are obviously very good at what they do, very clever, but they're also not so rigid that they will only do one thing. So I think I covered some of that bases when I hire people. And there probably is a place for people that only want to model and that's all they do. Great. But when I build teams, I try and build diverse in terms of the skills as well, not just the pure ML AI skill. And I think it worked well in the team I had because they'd done some really cool stuff in the machine learning space. So they'd had a taste of what they really love doing. And they loved the company, and they could see the reason that they were being sort of repurposed, and it was fine. And they learned as well at the same time. They learned some new skills as well.
Very cool. Jen, how's that been for you, especially coming from a different background industry, really? How's the last 6 months impacted in the market you are seeing?
certainly echo what's already been covered off, but I'd just add that, like, the real skills that are shining through that people need are flexibility and adaptability, because COVID has made us pivot in many ways, and we're needing people who are adaptable and also understand the business. So certainly there was a lot of hype around data scientists before, and everybody labelled themselves as a data scientist, and someone who wanted to be more a purist in playing with data. But now because the world's changed, we've really got to get back to our basics to understand what's going on in the world. So it's people with business skills, with understanding their environment, being able to not just speak machine language, but also speak human language are the skills that are really in demand for us at the moment.
Yeah, could not agree more. Being able to speak to people, being able to influence, work closely with stakeholders and customers. I think it's one of the areas that is of greater and greater importance for data scientists. And when you add the domain knowledge, obviously adding it to the people skills and the technical skills, but when you add the domain knowledge, you get so much more benefit out of, and individuals can contribute at a much bigger pace and bigger scale. So yeah, definitely true. And I've also even seen it for the expectation that organizations have of consultants now. It's kind of changing as more companies develop their own data science teams. They're taking on obviously a lot of the work that in the past might have been outsourced, and now it seems like consultants are now being used for either deeply technical things or areas where they have specific domain knowledge that they can contribute to the organization. So no, really, really interesting.
So I could just add to that quickly. So
yeah, of course.
A couple of points, adding on to Jan's point with the adaptable and flexible. I think it's the ability to draw out what the asker or the question poser is actually asking as well. I think too, in these times with a lot of stress and companies, say, we just need to know how many things we sold or how many sites we're running. And so I think a good data skilled person who is pivoting can say, well, why are you wanting to know that? Or is that related to that? So it's not just being an order taker. Like, you can pivot and just be an order taker, but pivoting and actually with the business knowledge, asking the right questions at the same time. Yes. And then I did have another point then, but now the consultants point. Yes, I agree that the sort of data science generalist consultants, it's now more you go for a domain specialist. Again, there's so many data integration products and domain specific data products. It's having a consultant that knows that domain, and also a consultant that can write a data strategy and have that helicopter view. But whereas getting someone in to say we just need to merge some data and do some code and charts, I think that's possibly have moved on. Yeah,
completely agree.
The technology's got easy now that we can do a lot of these things ourselves, hasn't it? So for the role that consultants used to fill, we can do by ourselves. So now they've got to be adding value in different ways.
I love it. That is so true. So I wanted to jump into the diversity part, and I wanted to maybe start at the leadership level, and I might ask you, Jan, first around how do you ensure that your leadership structures, both in data and across the organization, that they are diverse. Have you seen any ways working well in order to be able to make that difference? And how do you approach it and think about it?
Yeah, it's really important, and I'd just like to start by saying diversity is a very, very broad area. So certainly the number one rule around creating a leadership team that is diverse is making sure you're hiring the right people for the job and being sure what it is that you need or want before you go looking. So then you take out all your biases that might come into play when you see that person. You've got your criteria set. because diversity comes in all forms. Like it's gender, it's age, it's ethnicity, background, where you were born, how many people in your family, all of those things create the unique person. So yeah, just making sure you know what that unique person looks like and recognize the attributes.
Yeah, exactly. And what about you, Virginia? Do you have any thoughts on how to ensure diversity in leadership? Any ways that have worked for you, either for your leadership teams or leadership teams that you've been part of? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, so I guess if we're talking even about sort of creating our own data-related leadership teams, I often come in thinking that it's a given that they know about data. So perhaps in the 1990s when Jan was asked, do you know about a relational database, and sort of do enough screening ahead of time that it's given that they know that. And so I focus a lot of my interviews on who they are as a person. And they're like, don't say how many kids have you got and that sort of thing, but just the sorts of places they've worked, I often ask, what's the coolest problem you've ever solved? And I think that really brings out people's true nature. And so sometimes those that have rehearsed answers don't go as strongly as those really interesting people that have done some cool stuff in cool places and that they're really excited about it. And there's also another, I follow a Harvard professor called Amy Cuddy, and she's all about connecting with your people and then leading. So some of the things in her early papers that I read, I really resonate with me about connecting with people. And then through that, you work out their individual diversity and then how to sort of get the best out of that for the whole team.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's actually, I think, and apologies if there's other companies that do this, but the ANZ Bank has a neurodiversity program, especially in this space. And so for people who are on the spectrum or other neuro differences, who are brilliant and passionate about data and maths in this area, they have a dedicated program to bring these people into the business and have them as just that another dimension of diversity in a team, which is super cool.
Super interesting. Really, really cool. And Jan, I wanted to ask you about the hiring process to help build diverse teams. Do you have any tips that have worked well? Do you have any views on how it can be done better? Anything you can share?
Yeah, there's a lot of traps in the hiring process, and certainly it even starts with things like job title and job description and how you advertise the roles. And certainly, like working in the government sector, we're very traditional in what we call jobs and how we describe them and our approach to that. And that doesn't help us attract the right people. And when I say the right people, it's like whoever the unicorn is that fits the need that we have. So yeah, we do limit ourselves from that respect, and it's something that's very, very important that we overcome. So hence I end up going to agents to do most of my recruiting, because then I can sit down with them and say, well, actually we are a bit different as a team, we're not what you expect, and then they get to know us and get to know the people that will fit well within our team. So yeah, it is a process that is quite fraught in a traditional sense, and it's a battle to appeal to people who would be just brilliant at the job but might have, as Virginia said, of someone who thinks a wee bit differently, and certainly appealing to women. It takes a different type of description. A lot of our job descriptions across the board use quite male language, very direct and definite language. And so, there's a lot of lessons to take out of this, but certainly how we advertise ourselves and how we build our relationships. So at the moment, we rely quite heavily on personal relationships and the culture that I've built within the team so that people know us as a team. And certainly through my leadership is very, very important to attract the right people. that I have visibility and people understand the type of environment that I offer within my team, and that so then that the attraction of that overweighs the job description which they might see.
That's really good. I know.
Yes, I've seen ads where you have to solve a problem as part of the ad, or, does, some kind of data or some quirky phrase mean something to you, and that will often pique people who might think a little bit differently's interest, who might not want to be a senior data scientist for X, but they go, hey, that's a cool problem, I wouldn't mind solving that. So I've seen some more creative ways of jobs being advertised. And then again, to Jan's point, with this industry being so popular, there's a certain thinking that I want to be a data scientist, then a senior data scientist, and then, I don't know, a data science manager or a principal data scientist or chief. And so people are looking for the title. And I think if they're looking just for the title, they're in it for the wrong reason as well. So I think that's something to be careful of, that we sometimes don't fall into that traditional, really hierarchical recognition that, it's about the things you do and the team. A big part, as Jan said, is the team of fellow passionate data people that you get to be part of.
Yeah, definitely the community aspect is super important. That's actually one of the reasons why, one of the kind of aspects that I recognize with She Loves Data, where the work we are doing in terms of building like a local communities is super important, because that's honestly one of the biggest barriers I have seen. It's when you go to 5 years ago, when you went to any data science or really data engineering meetup or data visualization less so event, you will see that 95% of the attendees are guys, and then women are simply intimidated to join all male club. And there's a reason why you are in leadership positions, because you were bold to do certain pivot and leap of faith at some point, and this is not something that we generally see across the population. This is really the outliers who do that, right? So I'm kind of curious, and diversity obviously has been a big topic, and it's been on the corporate banners for a very long time right now, and there are very sort of an easy and direct path to that, where you are going to say to recruiters, say, I'm only accepting certain mix of resumes when you are filling this role for me, and that's kind of the most obvious way how to do that. But I'm curious if you also have seen, either personally experienced, designed, or seen elsewhere, any other interesting ways how to foster diversity, especially more from the in-house perspective. How do you look at it within the broader team, within the broader business or organization, where you really encourage that? I'm kind of looking at it from perspective where what I personally really like is I like people who do several career pivots during their time. I think that's starting from zero, is eventually you are going to end up with 3 times 80% is more than 1 time 95%. So I really encourage that, and I like when people have the ambition to join a completely different department and start somewhere else, where that synthesis of that experience is going to be very powerful a couple of years down the line. So I'm curious if you've seen any initiatives like that within the businesses that would work, or that had some success stories where you've seen people under your leadership have grown into roles that would be unexpected a few years before.
Absolutely. That defines my team, to be honest. So my team, when I first took them over, actually I took over 2 teams, and they were the information management team and the data warehouse team, and they didn't know each other's names between the teams. There were 2 core functions and didn't work together. So mashed it together as a startup. So I had 21 direct reports and completely changed the way I'm working. With taking that approach, the people changed. They became amazing. Like they realized their inner potential. They were being constrained by the environment they were operating in, and just absolutely grew into phenomenal people. So with all the skills that were latent within them. So giving people the opportunity certainly others within the organisation is a great way to foster and nurture new talent that can grow into this data space. And data people can come from anywhere, you're right. So looking for people when they apply for roles from the outside, it's, as Virginia touched on, you have to look for what the whole person is, not just have they been a data scientist before. It's looking at where they've worked, what they've done, but also what do they do outside work. So what are people's interests? Have they changed career 3 times? That shows flexibility and agility, which are 2 key skills that we touched on earlier, are essential. You know, if someone had just been in one career path all there to date, they're not right for this environment. They're not right for an environment where the rate of change is just that high. And COVID's accentuated it, but it is high in the data world. So yeah, you do need to look for the whole person.
And why, Jan? Why did you choose to have all 21 people as direct reports to you? How was that decision made? And yeah, if you can elaborate on the benefits that came as a result. But that would have been a tough decision to make, to choose to have 21 direct reports. It's a lot.
And yeah, in a government agency, it was unprecedented. But at the time, we were broken and things weren't getting better, and there was no other way to make them better. So I proposed this restructure to create the startup type structure so we could break all our habits. And there was incredible resistance to it. So from an HR perspective, the textbook says you have between 5 and 8 direct reports. So they were very, very against it. The senior leadership team were very against it as well. And so I put the question to them, well, tell me another way to go on the journey that I'm telling you I need to go on. And they didn't have an answer to that. So then they put a lot of faith in me, I'll say it like that, rather than thought, well, we'll let her have a go, and if she crashes and burns, okay, we're no worse off. I'm not sure which way their decision went, but they did open the door and certainly went through it. And yeah, we haven't looked back. Well, the structure's changed since, but that was what was a catalyst to get us started. It was certainly interesting times.
For sure. So you were hoping that the team would kind of like reset, or what? I guess I should ask. What were some of the things that you were hoping as a result of that strong change in the org structure, and also tell us about a little bit of what it looks like now.
So definitely hoping the team would reset. I figured I had nothing to lose because it couldn't be more broken. I also gave myself half a day. If on the first day, if I hadn't got their trust and confidence in the vision for the future, it was all over. So gave it my best shot, got them all in a room, gave them a bit of a speech from the throne to motivate, inspire, tell them what the future looked like, then asked them if they were on that journey or not. There was silence for a few seconds, and then the person with the strongest personality in the group asked me a question, and I thought, here goes. And it was a very reasonable question, and I answered it, and they said, okay. And that was it. It just happened.
Oh. And what does the org structure look like now?
So yeah, the 21 direct reports was not a scalable structure, but it certainly did what it needed to do, and my team's now over double that. So now it's teams centred around, focused on centres of excellence, so around each function, like business intelligence, data warehousing. I have a web team in there, data team, testing team. Well, that's merging in with the development team now, one that has the BAs and runs the agile practice. And most excitingly, I have an innovation team. So that's the secret sauce for making the big change, and certainly something I introduced with the startup mentality was using the concept of Imagineering. Imagine the future and engineer your way back as to how we're going to achieve it, so we can make step changes, not just incremental changes. And that's how we've been very, very effective in getting the organisation to go on the journey it's gone on, because they love the vision of the future. So that's been very good, and being able to sell them on the world could be a better place if you just go on this journey with us, and we can help you. So yeah, it's been really cool.
Wow, that's amazing! What a journey, that's incredible, actually. Virginia, I wanted to ask you about what type of leadership diverse teams need, and whether there's differences in what in what diverse teams require, in the way that they're managed, that they're led, and what are some of the benefits that you've seen from building diverse teams throughout your career?
So I think the leader themselves has to be diverse, and by that I don't mean they have to meet a female quota or a certain like ethnicity quota and whatnot, but diverse as in they've lived a life, they've worked in different sectors, they've done, and even they've worked on tiny projects to big projects. They've pivoted themselves, and that they're a multi-dimensional person. I think that has to be, that is necessary, because I think in that way then they can understand from many perspectives where their diverse team is coming from. So not to say that they've lived everything at their team, but they've seen enough to know that there is such diversity and it can be successful. So I've unfortunately worked in a diverse team with a very controlling and micromanaging person, and it was an absolute disaster. So yes, this person was very knowledgeable and very technical, but they had to control everything, and it was an absolute disaster. So that was pretty tough. Yeah, that's probably what I would just say, that the leader themselves. And I think the leader has to be open and to listen to different points of view, and really, to Jan's point, having 21 direct reports. So I've not done that by design, but when I've been building teams and some of the leadership positions hadn't been filled, I had probably about the same direct reports, which at the time you think, oh, I'm going to die. But it was actually a massive opportunity to get to know people really one-on-one, that perhaps, through hierarchy, you might not have gotten to know them as human beings. So that by accident, laid a really, really good foundation, because I think in the end I had a team of 60. And so 20 of those, they still sometimes call themselves the dream team, that we were all there at the start setting this thing up. Some of them turned out not to be my direct reports, but I got to know them as humans, and then they were on the bus, so to speak. Yeah.
That's really great. And towards you brought up quotas, actually, around gender and gender diversity and ethnicity diversity. What are your views on quotas, Virginia? I'm really, really curious.
I'm just going to go out there. I don't agree with them. So.
Yeah. Why is that? Yeah.
So I'll talk to the gender diversity. I'll use that because I am, gender diverse. So for someone so it can build resentment. So, so for people who don't get a job, if they might not get a job because of merit, but then they can think it's because of the quota. And then people like myself that have perhaps, gotten some great jobs, going, is it just because I'm a female and I'm working in X company with a quota? Am I really deserving of that role? So as a female in a company that had quotas, you question yourself going, am I good? And then if I'm questioning myself, are all my peers or the person who didn't get the job over me questioning themselves? But then, I caveat that saying, if you have a diverse mindset, then diversity I feel I sound like a total hippie, but it can come into your world. If you recruit, you have job ads, you have ideas of the sorts of roles that people are going to have, the diversity often presents itself. And And you can, and I find interestingly in this field, I find ethnodiversity is actually very easy, because it's sort of, people tend to study and get interested in this sort of stuff from all over the world. So if I use my BHP team, I think we had 25 different nationalities in our team at BHP. And that, again, was not by design, but it was just all these amazing people from all over the world came and wanted to be part of our team. So on one hand, when I say I don't like quotas, I also don't think you should ignore all the aspects of diversity when you're building a team. And that's an okay answer.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's really, really interesting. I hadn't thought about how it can undermine the confidence of the person who gets the opportunities, as well as affect the peers and people who didn't get the job. That's a really good view. Thank you.
Jan's turn now.
Yeah, so there's one more attribute I would add to that, and that's bravery. So to be a leader of a diverse team, you've got to be brave and go outside your own comfort zone, because otherwise the worst thing you can have is a team of clones. Then you get nowhere, and that's a safe option for many people, and that's why it's hard to build and sustain a diverse team. So you have to be able to be prepared to take on something that you don't know, and certainly there are a lot of good opportunities, as Virginia said, about hiring people from different backgrounds. So there's a lot. My team has quite a number of people who weren't even born in New Zealand, which is quite ironic, given the role that my organisation has of building the skills for New Zealand. I've had to import so many of the people that are imports, the people that I've got, so we're not even keeping pace with what our own country needs in terms of skill development. But you have to be brave and go out there. You also have to be know that there is a limit, because there is such a thing as too much diversity in a team, and then it doesn't gel as a team. Yeah. When you bring someone new in, and this comes back to the whole person aspect, they've got to be able to fit in a way with what you have. So they can't have a personality that's just so very, very different. Or at one point I went to hire someone who I thought was going to really stretch us in the direction that we needed to go, and right at the last minute I changed my mind and didn't hire them because they were just too much of a stretch for us at the time. They would have got frustrated, they would have put too much pressure on the rest of the team. And quite ironically, 2 years later I hired his wife, who was equally genius, and it was the right time for her. So yeah, bravery and also a touch of realism are essential as to build and sustain a diverse team.
I love that.
Yeah, can I just ask, actually, Jan, on that bravery point too, is that do you think the leader themselves has to be brave to share themselves as well? So for themselves to be that diverse human being, as well as like almost taking a risk of sharing about yourself?
Absolutely agree on that. Yeah, if you've got to walk the walk and talk the talk. And I think if we bring this back to like the gender topic, there's throughout my career, and I'm sure you've got as many, if not more, examples of the same thing. You're at an event with some of your team and people come up and say, "Oh, I love your work," and start talking to the guys, and then they listen and participate in the conversation, and then they say, "I'd like to know more," and they say, "Well, meet our boss Jan," and it's she'll be able to follow up with you.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
A quick story of something like that as well. I was at a conference, like a modelling conference, and you have this, the champagne, the drink, and you wander around and meet people, and what are you working on? And there's one guy sort of said, oh, you know, I'm doing this sort of, I won't say which domain, but I'm doing this sort of predictive modeling and, you know, but are you any good at maths? I went, I've got a PhD. And then I said to him, I've got a PhD in it, mate. And just went and talked to somebody else. And then one of the beautiful things was then that I was also in charge of certain grants and chairs and funding, and this person's name came up, and I remembered that, are you, it's a bit complicated. Are you any good at maths? It's like, right.
Brilliant.
Wow.
One of the lessons there is that this is such a small field and such a small community. I've literally ended up meeting someone I met in Australia and then in Singapore, in Dublin, through a different business that we work with. So it's very, very small field. This is something to be always careful about. Ladies, you've brought up something that kind of triggered a question that I have about education a little bit. So you talked about some of the attributes of a person, really, which have kind of less to do with the formal education: flexibility, curiosity, bravery, which Jan brought up, which I think is beautiful and important. Not easy to come by, but nonetheless very important. But when we talk about like leadership, I really like to look at the other side of the table. So it's who we lead, right? And when you look at building teams, designing organizations, there's obviously formal education plays a big role in that. And I think it's undeniable that education is something that is probably one of the least innovative areas in the worldwide in last 100 years, if you look at how our society has developed. So I'm curious in what do you see in that regard? And I'll kind of share a little bit of my experience. When you look at specifically machine learning or data science generally as a discipline, advanced analytics field, education, you're typically talking to people who study statistics, math, modeling, and this is purely technical discipline. And what I'm looking at when I'm looking at programs like that in Singapore, we have people who are really, really good at that at the time the university churns them out, but they have zero relatability to business and to the world around them, and I consider that a bit of an issue. So I'm curious as to how do you see that in Australia and New Zealand, because I think this is going to be regionally different, and I would love to kind of hear on where you think this needs to go, where this needs to develop, and maybe Virginia, if you have an opinion on that.
I was going to say Jan's in the education profession, so you should start. Do you think? Or
you go, and then I'll follow up.
Oh, okay, sure. Gosh, so I know when I went through university, it was a lot of I call it chalk and talk, so proving theorems, that sort of thing. And what I'm seeing now, so I'm actually involved in helping some universities in Australia design data science qualifications, and so Bachelor of Data Science, Masters, graduate certificates. And a lot of that is about experiential learning, forcing, as everyone hates group work, but, forcing them to work in groups and on projects, coming up with a hypothetical. So perhaps I have some data from where I work and coming up with hypothetical solutions instead of textbook data. So I'm finding that it's much more, and I think too with technology in the in lecture theatres and classrooms, there's a lot of interactive even now, just chatting between groups and technology. And I think you don't want people to be spat out of the education system, but it is a way of exposing them to the way of working these days. And those who really thrive are the ones that work well with others, collaborate, can draw problems out, and and think more on their feet as well, I suppose.
There are certainly some quite significant shifts happening within the system, so it doesn't look so different on the outside. You still do a 3-year degree, but how you get that degree, and it's the same in New Zealand, the soft skills that are being developed is really important for particularly people coming out into the field of data straight from study. In New Zealand, we've got a significant reform in our education system going on, and it's very, very timely, if not a fraction too late. COVID certainly highlighted the need for people to get skills in shorter bites, people that need to change jobs, and that's what we're seeing in the data space. that we've been talking about, is people pivoting from one role to the next and using their life experience and their passion for data, but maybe need a few skills. So across the world, this has been recognised, and there's a whole lot of great universities have got behind and developed MOOCs, so the massive open online courses that you can study anywhere. I'm using those to help build some of the skills in my team. So it's just a short chunk of learning that they do online from an overseas university. So it's how we look at education. There's certainly value in the formal education, the universities and the polytechs or TAFEs as they are in Australia, but there's a lot of value in the smaller, less well-known areas that are certainly rising to supplement. So it's a quite exciting time.
Yeah. And I've actually had a lot of self-taught people who are, so even now people who are have done graphic design and journalism, so they can, they like telling a story and taking people on a journey with a story, and then they're self-taught in some of the data aspects of that. So they might not have a Bachelor of blah on paper, but they're, so again, it's not everything has to be formal education. And often if you're self-taught, it shows that you've got that initiative and passion to get into it and learn it yourself.
Well, YouTube even is a fantastic resource. There is nothing you can't learn off YouTube. Mm-hmm. And it's how you apply it is where the magic happens.
Amazing.
I think perhaps that could be a podcast on its own, and YouTube as a source of information. I think the curation is the hard part of it. But you're right, there is literally everything, including some of the not necessarily good things. But I think it's a super important point on the education and on degrees. I think the companies like Google announced it even a few years ago at this point that they are dropping the education requirements, diplomas for most of the roles that they have, and I think this is that's a significant sign ahead of the times that are coming. So totally, and I do consider that part of the diversity, because not everyone has an opportunity or the willingness to go through education system. I am definitely a part of that. I've never finished a university, and I'm doing pretty okay. So I think that's definitely an important piece. Ladies, maybe kind of to wrap up with a kind of the diversity topic, and we're going to be wrapping up the talk in a bit. Is how would you there's still a lot of organizations, obviously, who are not necessarily stepping into that, and I would say this is the more traditional businesses which have sort of a less of a dynamic environment. How would you sell organizations onto the benefits of having diversity in the team? What would be the sort of the talking points that you would use as a kind of a fostering this in the organizations where this is not native, I would say, initiative?
I'll just jump. I actually often I use a lot of just case studies and anecdotes for people. So rather than having, say, an elevator pitch or a pre-prepared sort of strategy, I sort of work out what the organization is, even what they do as an organization, what sort of culture they may have. And an example I use, so again, when I was at BHP, I hired a medical researcher into my team, and she worked out that the survival model, it sounds a bit, the survival models of people with, say, a cancer or a particular type of cancer, the types of models are the same models you could apply on a truck. So I know a person is not a truck, but just showing the organisation, you don't need to limit yourself to only hiring people who've worked in heavy engineering industry. And of course, BHP were extremely open to all of that, but that's just one example I've used in an organisation to say that you never know where these gems are hiding, people that you may not have ever considered, and look how useful a lung cancer modeler is in an engineering mining organisation.
Wow.
So yes, sorry, it's more anecdotes I use, and I sort of try and quickly go through my filing cabinet in my head of examples where perhaps the diversity that they don't have has worked in another organisation, and I can encourage them to just plant the seed.
that's a totally the most sensible approach. I think motivating with the real life case studies is always the best approach, I think. And it's really, it's fantastic. And I mean, I really like this conversation. I'm fortunate to have relatively global exposure, and I work everywhere virtually from New Zealand to Europe, and seeing different answers on the questions, some of the questions we covered today is a very, very, very different. And I would say it's kind of obvious to me that Australia and New Zealand is out innovating the space in terms of what I'm seeing in the initiatives, diversity, especially in the Southeast Asia. It's just come much more natural, and I think it's also we talked before about the ethno diversity, and I think this is something that's so much more natural to countries like Australia or New Zealand, because I see that in Europe. Like for me, being based out of Prague last 6 months, it's been somewhat shocking in how uniform everything is. Like everybody looks like me, everybody thinks like me, and we just don't have the diversity. And I think it's hurting definitely the kind of a global competitiveness of the country and of the product team and of the businesses here as well, because they are locked within similar mindset. And I think it's really like last 6 months is sort of, for me personally, totally made me reconsider how I think about diversity. And I think it's moved and evolved really, really way beyond just gender. And it's been interesting to kind of hear your perspective today. So thanks for that.
As I say, Jan didn't get to answer the last. I would love to hear Jan's response to that, selling diversity to organizations.
Yes, same.
Yeah, so my approach is an unashamable approach of talking about the future, selling the future, and then the only way that you can deliver that is not be what you are now. So we need to be different, we need to work different, we need to think different, and this is how it happens. And so it normalizes diversity by wanting something different to what we have now.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know we went a little bit over time. Just your perspectives are incredible. It's really helpful, and it's so important to help people open up the blind spots that that we all have. And I know that on the diversity front, I've personally made a lot of mistakes in by not having the experience and the lessons that you shared today, like for example, the language that goes onto the job ads, or I've sent self-assessment surveys for people to fill out that have had language that's not completely inclusive, and I could see the impact of that on the return rates of who was filling out the survey more than others. And I just can't thank you enough for everything that you've shared, and about your journey, your experience, your insights on how to make more diverse teams, how to be a great leader to those teams, and how to get the best out of each individual person in a way that's best for them and for your relationship with them. So thank you so much, Jan, Virginia. Thank you so much for your time today. Pavel, always great to do another episode with you. Can't thank you enough. So thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. It was awesome to be able to have this conversation, and I hope it's of value to those who listen to it.